Hey, what's good, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of my channel, Wider Perspective. Some of you may know, or quite a bit of you may know me from my other channel, my more popular channel, Broader Perspective. Anyways, and nonetheless, I wanted to talk about how we are all slaves in some shape, form, or another. Now, one perfect example, and this is on behalf of a lot of my white folks who feel like you are so much more superior than other ethnic groups, to the point where you could be able to be on a job, even if you may be a part of management, as a perfect example, either a manager or a supervisor, without facing any kind of dire consequences due to white privilege or due to the color of your skin, only for it to be a case whereas your company may not meet a certain performance threshold, or your team may not meet a certain threshold or quota, only for the higher up of the company, you may be either a supervisor, manager, for to start giving you a whole earful, so to speak, to even start to give you such an earful, so to speak, to the point where that higher up, that CEO of the company, may threaten to fire you, even by you being a white person. That's a perfect example of how we are all slaves, and in spite of color, skin color, or race. And this is on behalf of not just my white people, but all races of people. Whether we know it or not, we are some of the most biggest slaves in more ways than one. For instance, how many of you may have a job and you may do all you can, if you may be running late going to that workplace of yours so you could be able to start your job, you may go as far as not even fully washing up. You may just take a whole bath. In other words, for some of you who may want me to elaborate more, you may just take a bath, whereas you may wash up with a facial towel from out the sink instead of taking a whole full shower or bath in the bathtub. You may go as far as taking one of those kind of quick baths and then rush to put on clothes, even if your clothes may not be all the way ironed, or in some cases may need to be washed, and may rush to get in your car, do all you can and speed through traffic just to be at that particular workplace. And this is a perfect example, another perfect example of how we are slaves, whether we know it or not. And then to add even more insult to injury, you end up clocking in, even on behalf of a lot of my folks who may have went out of your ways going into work an hour early, which I commend you for. But either way it went or goes, you always have to clock in or punch in on the time clock in most cases, and give all your dedicated time to somebody else's corporation. And not only that, but even when you may want to or need to take either a 15-minute break, because at some workplaces you may get upwards to 2 15-minute breaks without having to clock out. And then when the lunch break could be between 30 minutes long, or in some cases an hour long. It just depends on whether you may work. Now, if you may work 9 hours plus, you're entitled to a 1 hour lunch break. But think about, folks, how you always have to, every single time you go on that lunch break, because most companies offer an unpaid lunch break, whereas every time you may clock out for lunch and then clock back in, rush to clock back in from lunch, you don't get paid for that time going away from off the clock, just so you can be able to enjoy, whatever food you may have during that lunch break, or whatever other kind of activity you may need to take care of, what other kind of tasks or whatever, while being gone away from that company. Because a lot of us have to, even if we may be gone off the premises from our workplaces for X amount of time, let's just say you may go 15 minutes over your 30-minute lunch break. You have to most likely face consequences, direct consequences and repercussions by, in some cases, you may have a workplace where your time may get disallowed, facing a high risk of your time getting disallowed or docked. In other words, your time may get taken away. Some of your time may get taken away from you for being, in some cases, 5 minutes late from going back, on behalf of going back to lunch after clocking out from lunch on that job. That's another perfect example of how we are slaves, once again, in spite of race, skin color. You might as well throw that out the window, because, and once again, on behalf of my white folks, my Caucasian folks, you are just as much as a slave as any other group of people. Forget about back in the slavery days when it was mostly us, people my race, who had to slave so many days, hours, minutes, seconds, months, weeks, picking cotton in all kinds of elements of weather, all kinds of inclement weather. Well, nowadays, you are just as much of a slave as we were way back in the slavery times. I mean, you might as well throw that white privilege out the window, because that white privilege is slowly fading away as well. But that's a whole other video for a whole other topic. Let me get back to the lecture at hand. Now, another way we are slaves without realizing it, and some of us don't even much notice. Anytime you may go to the bank, think about how when your hard-earned money from working a job for dedicating, on behalf of dedicating so many minutes, seconds, and hours on that job, how you have to get a certain amount, only a certain amount within the same day, or within a certain day while going to the bank. If you may want to get a withdrawal, which is, whether you know it or not, another example and form of slavery. Because how can you tell me how much to get out of my bank account? For instance, if I may have $6,000, how can you tell me that I would just have to withdraw no more than $1,000 a day when my very own money? See, that's where they get us as well, on being able to, whether we know it or not, that's another prime indication of how we are slaves without even much realizing how much we are slaves. Anyways, make sure to like the video, share the video, and last but not least, subscribe to the channel. And I'm out, y'all.